It was 6:03 in the morning on a nearly empty city bus, and my breakfast was cold instant noodles in a coffee cup. By 6:17, my bank account was empty. My landlord was texting that we needed to talk, and a stranger slid a grocery card into my hand like a weapon. 3 weeks later, that $25 card had blown up a 10-year scam, put my parents in handcuffs, and turned those noodles into evidence. My name is Ava Parker, and at 28 years old, I had reduced my entire existence to a series of pixelated adjustments and sodium-heavy compromises. I lived in a shoebox studio in Riverton Heights that smelled permanently of damp drywall and other people's cooking, and I worked as a freelance photo retoucher for a boutique agency called Brightcart Media. My job, ironically enough, was to make things look perfect. I smoothed out wrinkles on linen shirts, brightened the eyes of models who had not slept in 20 hours, and erased the cracks in driveways for real estate brochures. I spent 12 hours a day manufacturing a glossy, flawless reality for strangers, while my own life was held together by duct tape and the terrifying hope that my contract would be renewed for another month. It was 6:03 in the morning on the number 41 bus. The vehicle was a rattling steel cage cutting through the pre-dawn gray of the city, nearly empty save for a nurse asleep in the back row and a man in a fraying wool coat sitting 2 seats ahead of me. The air inside was cold, the kind of damp chill that settles into your bones and refuses to leave until July. My breakfast was a cup of instant beef noodles that I had prepared with lukewarm water from the office break room tap before leaving my night shift. It was distinctively unappetizing, a slurry of cold broth and congealed starch, but it cost 40 cents, and 40 cents was exactly what I could afford if I wanted to make rent next week. I pulled my phone out, shielding the screen from the flickering overhead lights. This was my morning ritual, a masochistic mix of anxiety and reassurance. I tapped the blue icon of the Westline Bank app and waited for the little spinning wheel to load. I needed to see it. I needed to see the number that proved I was not just treading water, but actually swimming somewhere. The screen loaded. Savings account ending in 492. Nickname Studio Dream. Balance $11,800.14. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. That money was 4 years of skipped lunches, 4 years of wearing boots with holes in the soles, 4 years of saying no to drinks, to movies, to weddings, to life. It was my escape fund. It was the down payment on a modest photography studio where I could finally shoot my own work instead of fixing everyone else's. It was my dignity, sitting there in digital form. $11,800. It was safe. I took a sip of the cold, salty broth, feeling a momentary sense of peace. Then the phone vibrated in my hand. A sharp, aggressive buzz. A banner notification slid down from the top of the screen. Westline Bank Alert transaction approved. Lux Travel Boutique. $3,900. I stared at the words, my brain refusing to process them. I blinked, thinking it was a glitch, a delayed error, a phantom signal. I had not bought anything. I was eating 40-cent noodles on a public bus. The phone buzzed again. Westline Bank Alert transaction approved. Prestige timepieces. $3,600. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like it had fallen through the floor of the bus and onto the asphalt below. My hands began to shake, violently, splashing drops of brown broth onto my jeans. I did not even feel the heat. I tapped frantically on the notification, trying to open the app, but my fingers were clumsy with panic. Another buzz. Transaction approved. Gourmet Horizon Catering. $2,400. No, I whispered, the sound scraping out of my throat. No, no, no. I watched, paralyzed, as the numbers on my screen began to hemorrhage. It was like watching an artery open up. The balance of $11,800 flickered and vanished, replaced by a new, horrifying reality. Balance $1,900. Buzz. Transaction approved. Cash withdrawal. ATM ID 442. $500. Buzz. Transaction approved. Cash withdrawal. $500. I was gasping for air now, the bus suddenly feeling like a coffin. The walls were closing in. I jammed my thumb onto the call button for the bank, listening to the automated voice tell me that my call was important and that I should please hold for the next available representative. The hold music was a cheerful, synthesized jazz loop that sounded like a mockery of my entire life. I refreshed the screen, praying for a miracle, praying that it was a system error. Balance $7.12. The world tilted. My vision went spotty at the edges. 4 years, every late night, every humiliation, every hunger pang, gone. In the span of 3 minutes and 14 seconds, someone had gutted me. I felt a scream building in my chest, a raw, primal thing that wanted to shatter the windows, but I swallowed it down, choking on the taste of bile and beef flavoring. "Pick up," I hissed at the phone, tears hot and stinging in my eyes. "Please, pick up." The bus hit a pothole, jarring my spine. I looked up, wild-eyed, and realized the man in the fraying wool coat had moved. He was no longer 2 rows ahead. He was sitting directly next to me. He was older than I had initially thought, perhaps in his late 70s, with deep lines etched around a mouth that was set in a grim, straight line. His coat was worn at the elbows, the kind of garment you find in a donation bin, but his shirt collar underneath was stiff and white. He smelled of old paper and rain. He did not look at me. He was looking at my phone screen. I instinctively pulled the phone against my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was about to tell him to back off, to leave me alone, but he spoke first. His voice was low, gravelly, and lacked any of the pity I expected. "Keep everything," he said. I stared at him, blinking through the tears. "What?" He nodded toward the phone I was clutching. "The notifications, the transaction IDs. Take screenshots, now, before the app refreshes or locks you out." I'm on hold," I stammered, my voice trembling. "Someone stole it. Someone stole everything." "Screaming is useless," the old man said, his tone incredibly calm, almost clinical. "Panic is useless. Keep everything. Noise dies. Paper doesn't." He turned to face me then, and his eyes were startlingly clear, a piercing gray that seemed to dissect me. He did not look like a crazy person talking to strangers on a bus. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield. "Paper doesn't pay my rent," I snapped, the anger finally breaking through the shock. "I have $7. I have rent due in 4 days. Paper isn't going to fix this." The old man didn't flinch at my outburst. He didn't offer a platitude. He didn't tell me it would be okay. Instead, the corner of his mouth twitched upward in the ghost of a smile. He reached into the deep pocket of his worn coat and pulled out a small rectangular card. He slid it across the empty seat space between us, tucking it neatly under the edge of my notebook. It was a gift card. The plastic was glossy and thick, bearing the emerald green logo of Evergreen Market. I knew the place. It was the kind of grocery store where a single apple cost $3 and the air smelled like roasting coffee beans and artisan cheese. It was a place I walked past, never entered. "For when the noodles run out," he said. I looked at the card, then back at him. I felt a flush of humiliation. He thought I was a charity case. He thought $20 at a fancy grocery store would stop me from hyperventilating. "I don't need your charity," I said. Though my voice lacked conviction, I was terrified. "It is not charity," he said softly. "It is ammunition." I didn't understand him. I didn't have the mental capacity to decode riddles. The music in my ear stopped, and a human voice finally cut through. "Westline Bank, Fraud Department. This is Kevin speaking. How can I help you?" "Someone drained my account," I said into the phone, my voice rising in pitch. "My savings. $11,000. It's all gone. I'm looking at the transactions right now. I didn't make them. I'm on a bus. I'm nowhere near a travel boutique." I shoved the grocery card into my empty wallet without looking at it, treating it like a piece of trash. My focus entirely on the voice in my ear. "Okay, ma'am. Let me pull up your profile," Kevin said. I heard the clicking of keys. "I see the transactions. several high-value purchases, and 2 ATM withdrawals. Yes, reverse them. Freeze it. Do whatever you have to do. There was a long pause on the line, the kind of silence that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. "Ma'am," Kevin said, his voice changing. It was no longer the helpful customer service voice. It was the guarded, legalistic voice. "I am looking at the metadata for these transactions. The chip was read at the point of sale, and for the ATM withdrawals, the correct PIN was entered on the first attempt." "That's impossible," I said, clutching the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "I have my card. It's right here in my hand." "I understand that," Kevin said. "But our system shows these as card-present transactions authorized with a valid PIN. Usually, in these cases, it indicates the card was not compromised by a stranger, but rather accessed by someone who has access to your personal information." The blood drained from my face. Someone who has access. "Are you saying you won't give the money back?" I whispered. "I am saying we will open an investigation," Kevin said, sounding bored. "But given the PIN usage, this is currently flagged as a civil matter, potentially a domestic dispute. I can't issue a provisional credit at this time." A civil matter, a domestic dispute. The bus lurched as it began to slow down for the stop at 42nd Street. My mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. Who knew my PIN? I never wrote it down. I never told anyone, except once. 6 months ago, when my mother, Paula, had called me crying because her card was declined at the pharmacy and she needed insulin for my father. I had been stuck at work. I had given her the card. I had told her the code. 4492. The year they got married. She swore she had forgotten it immediately. She swore she shredded the note I texted her. My parents. The realization hit me harder than the poverty. It wasn't a hacker in a basement in a foreign country. It wasn't a skimmer on a gas station pump. Travel boutique, catering, bespoke watches. I looked up, gasping for air. The old man was standing up. The bus doors hissed open. He paused by the exit, looking back at me one last time. The morning light was cutting through the gloom, illuminating the dust motes dancing around his fraying coat. "Do not let them back you into a corner where you have to live in their story," he said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the engine. "Write your own." And then he stepped off, disappearing into the gray crowd of the morning commute. I sat there for another block, the phone dead in my hand. I was 28 years old. My net worth was $7.12. My bank had just told me I was on my own. I had a plastic card for a grocery store I couldn't afford to shop in, and a stomach full of cold noodles. I stood up on shaking legs and pulled the cord for the next stop. As I stepped off the bus onto the cracked pavement of Riverton Heights, the wind bit through my thin jacket. I didn't know it yet, but at that exact moment, 3 miles away in a warm, coffee-scented kitchen, my mother was already on the phone with my aunt, weeping theatrically about how worried she was about poor Ava, how I had been acting so erratic lately, how I was becoming so unstable. I gripped the handle of my bag. I didn't have money. I didn't have a lawyer, but I had the receipts, and I had a $25 grocery card. I started walking. The drive to Lakefield Hills usually took 40 minutes, but I made it in 25, my foot heavy on the accelerator of my rusted Honda Civic. The fuel light had been glowing an angry orange since I left the city limits, a warning that I was burning gas I could not afford to replace, but I pushed the car anyway. I needed the momentum. I needed the adrenaline to keep my hands from shaking long enough to turn the steering wheel. Lakefield Hills was where the air quality index seemed to improve simply by virtue of property taxes. The lawns were not just cut, they were manicured into submission. Uniform carpets of emerald green that defied the changing seasons. I turned onto Elmridge Drive, the street where I had spent my teenage years trying to be invisible, and pulled up to the curb 2 houses down from number 402. The house looked like a brochure for the American dream. It was a sprawling 2-story colonial with white shutters and a wraparound porch that screamed stability. But what caught my eye, what made the bile rise in my throat, was the vehicle parked in the driveway. It was a brand new SUV. an obsidian black behemoth that still had the dealer plates on the bumper. The sunlight glinted off its chrome rims, mocking my Civic's peeling clear coat. I marched up the driveway, my boots crunching on the pristine gravel. I did not knock. I still had a key, a relic from a time when I thought family meant an open door, not an open line of credit. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The smell hit me first. It was not the smell of burnt toast or stale air that filled my apartment. It was the rich, intoxicating aroma of imported French roast coffee and expensive vanilla bean candles. It smelled like money. It smelled like comfort. It smelled like my savings account. "Darren, did you check if the caterer included the vegan option for the donors?" A voice called out from the kitchen. "My mother, Paula." I walked into the open-plan living room. The morning light was streaming through the bay windows, illuminating a scene of domestic perfection that felt like a slap in the face. My father, Darren, was sitting at the mahogany dining table, surrounded by glossy stacks of paper. He looked distinguished, wearing a crisp polo shirt that fit him a little too well around the chest. My mother walked in from the kitchen, tightening the belt of a shimmering silk robe that looked like it cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She froze when she saw me standing in the archway, my hair windblown, my eyes wild. "Ava," she exclaimed, her face arranging itself into a mask of pleasant surprise. "Honey, you didn't say you were coming over. We would have made extra frittata." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My eyes were locked on the table where my father was sitting. Spread out before him were high-gloss brochures featuring lush rainforests and smiling children. The header on the top pamphlet read, "Hopefront Global Mission Retreat, Costa Rica." Beside the papers sat a set of crystal tumblers that caught the light, and on the floor, near his feet, was a set of hard-shell designer luggage. The tag was still on the handle. Luxe Travel Boutique, Gourmet Horizon Catering, Prestige Timepieces. The names from my bank notifications were physically manifesting in the room. "Is everything okay, sweetheart?" Paula asked, taking a step toward me, her silk robe swishing softly. "You look pale. Are you eating enough?" The audacity of the question made my vision blur. I stepped back, moving toward the hallway console table where Paula always dumped her purse. It was a habit of hers, leaving her bag open, spilling its contents like she expected the world to clean up after her. "Ava," Darren asked, his voice deep and authoritative, the voice he used when he was leading prayer groups. "What are you doing?" I ignored him. I reached into the leather tote sitting on the console. My hand brushed past a tube of lipstick and a heavy keychain before my fingers closed around what I was looking for. It was a sleek, navy blue debit card issued by Westline Bank. My name was embossed on the front. Ava Parker. I pulled it out. Buried right next to it was a crumpled receipt from yesterday. I smoothed it out against the hallway wall. One bespoke men's chronograph watch, $3,600, and another receipt, tucked into the side pocket, Leader's Retreat Package, Costa Rica, $3,900. I walked back into the dining room. The silence was heavy, thick with tension. I slapped the card onto the mahogany table. It made a sharp plastic click that sounded like a gunshot. I slammed the receipts down next to it. "Explain," I said. My voice was quiet, trembling with a rage I had never felt before. Paula looked at the card, then at me. Her eyes widened, and then, instantly, they filled with tears. It was a transformation so sudden it was almost impressive. Her lower lip trembled. "Oh, Ava," she choked out, pressing a hand to her chest. We were going to tell you. You stole $12,000 from me," I said. "You drained it. Everything. My studio, my rent, my food." "Borrowed," Paula corrected, a tear tracking perfectly down her cheek. "We borrowed it, honey, just for a little while, for God's work." "God's work." I pointed a shaking finger at the watch receipt. "Does God need a $3,000 watch?" "Mom, does God need a luxury retreat in Costa Rica?" Darren cleared his throat. He stood up slowly, unfolding his frame to his full height. He didn't look guilty. He looked disappointed. He looked like a CEO dealing with an unruly intern. Ava, you are looking at this through a very narrow lens, Darren said smoothly. In our line of work, image is currency. We are meeting with high-level donors next month. People who write checks with 6 zeros. If I show up wearing a cheap digital watch and a frayed suit, they don't see humility. They see incompetence. They see a bad investment. So you steal from your daughter, I screamed, to impress strangers. To secure funding, Darren corrected, his voice hard. This retreat is where the networking happens. Paula needed to look the part. We needed the luggage. We needed the catering deposit to host the kickoff dinner. It is an investment. Ava, when the donations come in next quarter, we were going to put the money back in your account, with interest. You stole it, I repeated, the word feeling inadequate for the violence of what they had done. I have $7. Dad, $7. I was eating noodles on a bus this morning because I can't afford coffee. Paula let out a sob, grabbing a tissue from a box on the sideboard. Don't be so dramatic. Ava, you always exaggerate. We raised you to be resilient. We didn't think you would begrudge your own parents a little help when we are so close to a breakthrough. I'm calling the police, I said. The words hung in the air, cold and absolute. I have the transaction records. I have the bank on the line. I'm reporting this as fraud. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Darren stopped moving. He placed his hands flat on the table, leaning forward. The benevolent father mask slipped off, revealing something sharp and reptilian underneath. You really don't want to do that, Ava, he said. Watch me, I said, reaching for my phone. Think about your career, Darren said. He didn't shout. He spoke with a terrifying calmness. You're a freelancer, right? Your reputation is everything. Who are you working for these days, Brightcart Media? And that wedding photographer, the one who sends you the bulk edits, Pastor Miller's nephew, isn't he? My thumb hovered over the screen. What does that have to do with anything? I know people, Ava, Darren said. I know the owners of the real estate firms you retouch for. I know the restaurant owners who hired you for their menus. I have known them for years. We play golf. We pray together. He took a step toward me. If you call the police, he continued, Paula and I will have to make some very difficult phone calls. We will have to tell them how heartbroken we are. We will have to ask for their prayers because our daughter is going through a severe mental health crisis. We will tell them you've been having delusions, that you've been erratic, that you're making up wild stories about your parents to get attention. I stared at him, my mouth dry. You wouldn't. We would be doing it out of love, Paula added, sniffing. She wasn't crying anymore. Her eyes were dry and alert. We can't let you ruin the ministry just because you're having an episode. Who do you think they will believe? Ava. The pillars of the community who have been serving Lakefield Hills for 20 years, or the struggling artist living in a studio apartment who can't even manage her own finances. You authorized this, Paula said, her voice gaining strength. Don't you remember 6 months ago, when Daddy needed his insulin and I was at the pharmacy, you gave me the pin. You said, use it for whatever you need. Mom, you set the precedent. That was for medicine, I cried. That was one time. That was $50. It was authorization, Paula said firmly. You gave us access, legally, technically. You shared the account. You can't call it theft just because you changed your mind about being generous. The words hit me like physical blows. Ungrateful, unstable, erratic. They were tossing these words around like prepared weapons. They weren't scrambling for excuses. They had this script ready. I looked at the brochures on the table. Hopefront. It sounded so noble. You've done this before, I whispered, the realization dawning on me with horror. This isn't the first time, is it? Darren picked up his crystal glass and took a slow sip of water. He didn't answer me. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes said everything. I was just another donor. I was just another resource to be mined until it was empty. Go home, Ava, Darren said, dismissing me. Cool off. We will pay you back when the Lord provides the harvest. But if you make a scene, if you try to drag our names through the mud, I promise you, by the time I am done making calls, you won't be able to get a job retouching passport photos at a drugstore." I stood there, shaking. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped the debit card. I looked at the luxury luggage, at the silk robe, at the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, and I saw them for what they were. They weren't religious. They weren't parents. They were vampires. I turned around and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I felt too small for that. I felt hollowed out. I walked back to my rusted Civic, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I climbed into the driver's seat and locked the door. My heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, I threw the stolen debit card onto the passenger seat. It was useless now. The money was gone. I started the engine. It coughed and sputtered before turning over. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the automatic sprinkler system kick on. Dozens of hidden heads popped up from the emerald grass, spraying a fine mist of water over the lawn in perfect, rhythmic arcs. I watched the water glisten in the sun. That water cost money. The landscaper cost money. The fertilizer cost money. My $11,800 was not just in a watch or a trip. It was here. It was in the grass. It was in the paint. It was in the coffee beans. I was driving away with an empty tank of gas, and my parents were watering their lawn with my dreams. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white and drove toward the exit of Lakefield Hills. The words of the old man on the bus echoing in the silence of the car. Do not let them back you into a corner where you have to live in their story. They had already written my character, the unstable daughter, the ungrateful child. I looked at the evergreen market card still tucked in my wallet. If they wanted a story, I would give them one, but it was not going to be the one they expected. The Westline Bank branch manager was a woman named Sarah, who wore a scarf that looked like it cost more than my car. She sat across from me in a glass-walled office that smelled of sanitizer and indifference, tapping her manicured fingernails on the mahogany desk. I had spent 40 minutes crying, then 20 minutes explaining, and then 10 minutes begging. "I understand your frustration, Ms. Parker," Sarah said, her voice maintaining a practiced, corporate calm that made me want to scream. "But I am looking at the log right here. The debit card was used with a PIN. The login for the online banking was accessed from a device that has been whitelisted on your account for 6 months. That was my mother's iPad," I said, my voice hoarse. "I logged in once to pay a hospital bill. Once. I didn't give her permission to drain my life savings to buy luggage. Without a police report proving theft. This falls under our authorized user policy," Sarah said, sliding a brochure across the desk. It was titled, "Protecting Your Assets." Since the parties involved are immediate family members who had prior access to the credentials, the bank views this as a civil dispute. We cannot reverse the wire transfers or the point-of-sale transactions. A civil dispute. I walked out of the bank into the blinding afternoon sun, feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. I drove straight to the Riverton Police Department. The waiting room was fluorescent and smelled of stale sweat and despair. I waited 2 hours to speak to an officer named Miller, a man with heavy bags under his eyes and a coffee stain on his uniform shirt. He listened to me for 6 minutes. He wrote down 3 sentences in a small notebook. "Look," Officer Miller said, capping his pen. "You gave them the PIN before—" "Yes, but—" "And they are your parents." "Yes, but they stole—" "Ms. Parker, if I go over there, they are going to tell me it was a loan. You are going to say it was theft. It is he said, she said, involving a domestic financial arrangement. Unless you have them on video holding a gun to your head while you transferred the money, the DA is not going to touch this. It is a domestic financial dispute. You need a lawyer, not a cop." He tore the sheet off his notepad and handed it to me. It was an incident number. It was a piece of paper that said we listened, and we do not care. I walked back to my car. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email from my landlord. "Mr. Henderson. Subject autopay. Returned, Unit 4B. Ava. Just got a notice that your rent payment bounced. Insufficient funds. You know I like you, but I have a mortgage to pay too. I need the cash plus the $50 late fee by tomorrow, or I have to start the paperwork. I can't be flexible forever. I leaned my head against the steering wheel and closed my eyes. The heat inside the car was suffocating. I felt like the walls of the world were closing in on me, tighter and tighter. A sudden, sickening instinct flared in my gut. If they had my debit card information, if they had access to my bank login, what else did they have? Paula knew my social security number. She had helped me file my taxes when I was 22. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone twice before I managed to open the Credit Karma app. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to load, praying to a God I wasn't sure was listening anymore. The number appeared. 512, my credit score, which had been a hard-fought 740 just 4 weeks ago, had cratered. It was a free fall. I scrolled down, my breath hitching in my throat, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. New accounts opened: Lantern, Bridge Finance, personal loan. Opened 3 weeks ago. Balance $22,000. Vista Gold credit card. Opened 2 weeks ago. Balance $9,000. Limit reached. Onyx Rewards card. Opened 10 days ago. Balance $6,500. Limit reached. I gagged. I physically gagged, opening the car door just in time to dry heave onto the pavement. $22,000. I clicked on the loan details. Lantern Bridge was one of those predatory online lenders that gave money to anyone with a pulse and charged 30% interest. The money had been dispersed to an account I didn't recognize. I checked the credit card statements. The transaction history was a roadmap of my parents' greed. Grand Resort Spa, Costa Rica, Sky High Airlines, First Class, Tech Heaven Electronics, 2 MacBook Pros, Serenity Soul Retreats. I pulled up my mother's Facebook page. There it was, a photo posted yesterday, Paula and Darren standing on a pristine white beach, holding coconut drinks, wearing matching white linen outfits. The caption read, "Taking a much-needed soul care retreat to recharge for our upcoming mission season. God provides in mysterious ways, blessed Hopefront Global." They were drinking cocktails on a beach paid for with my credit score. They were destroying my future to fund their vacation. They hadn't just drained my savings. They had strapped a bomb to my financial identity and detonated it. I was not just broke. I was buried under nearly $40,000 of debt I didn't create. I was hyperventilating. I sat in the parking lot of the police station, gasping for air, feeling the tears streaming down my face. I was 28 years old, and my life was over. I was a high-risk borrower. I was unbankable. My phone buzzed again. It was an email from Sarah, the account manager at Brightcart Media, my main client, my only steady income. Subject regarding your retainer. Hi, Ava. I am writing this with a heavy heart. We have had some concerning conversations recently regarding your capacity to handle the upcoming workload. We have heard from a few mutual contacts that you are under a significant amount of personal pressure right now and might be struggling with some stability issues. We love your work, but we need reliability. We have decided to pause your retainer for the next 90 days to give you time to sort out your personal situation. We wish you the best. I stared at the words, mutual contacts, Darren. He had done exactly what he said he would do. He had called the network. He had played the concerned father. Oh, Sarah, we are so worried about Ava. She is having a breakdown. She is manic. We just want her to get help. He had cut my income right when he knew I needed it most. It was a strategic strike. It was warfare. He was isolating me, stripping me of my resources, making sure I was too weak, too broke, and too discredited to fight back. I drove home in a daze. The city looked gray and hostile. When I reached my apartment building, I trudged up the 3 flights of stairs, my legs feeling like lead. There was something taped to my door. It was a bright, neon orange piece of paper. Notice to pay rent or quit. You are hereby required to pay the rent of $1,200 within 10 days or deliver up possession of the premises. 10 days. I unlocked the door and walked into my studio. It was dark. I hadn't turned on the lights to save electricity. I sat down on the floor, right there in the entryway, clutching the orange paper in one hand and my phone in the other. My stomach growled. A deep, painful rumble. I hadn't eaten anything since the noodles on the bus at 6 in the morning. It was now 5 in the afternoon. I had no money. My debit card was useless. My credit cards were maxed out by fraudsters who shared my DNA. Then I remembered. The wallet. I dug into my bag and pulled out the cheap faux leather wallet. Tucked in the back slot was the card the old man had given me, Evergreen Market. He said it was for when the noodles ran out. The noodles had run out. I stood up. I washed my face with cold water. I put on a hoodie to hide my shaking hands. I walked 4 blocks to the Evergreen Market on 4th Street. The automatic doors slid open, and I was hit with the smell of roasting rosemary chicken and fresh-baked sourdough. It smelled like a life I used to think I could earn. Now it just smelled like something I was stealing. I walked through the aisles, feeling like an imposter. I grabbed a rotisserie chicken, a bag of spinach, a carton of eggs, a loaf of bread, essentials. I stood in the checkout line, my heart pounding. What if the card was empty? What if it was a cruel joke? What if it had $5 on it and I had to put the chicken back while everyone stared at me? The cashier was a young guy with a nose ring. He scanned my items. $24.50, he said. I handed him the card. My hand was trembling. He swiped it. Beep. Approved. I let out a breath. It worked. Do you want your balance receipt? He asked. Sure, I whispered. He handed me the slip of paper. I looked at it, expecting to see maybe 50 cents remaining. Balance remaining. $500. I blinked. I looked at the number again. $500. Wait, I said. There must be a mistake. I thought this was a $25 gift card. The cashier looked at the screen. No, it's not a standard gift card. It's a corporate benefit reloadable. Looks like it topped up automatically when you made the purchase. See here. He pointed to a line of text on the receipt. Source HFT. A. Parker Fund. Status active. Recurring. What does that mean? I asked, my voice barely audible. I don't know the specifics, the cashier said, shrugging. We see these sometimes from the big firms downtown, hardship accounts or executive stipends. If you have questions, you have to call the number on the back. Ashford Trust Services. I took the grocery bag. It was heavy. It felt real. I walked out of the store, clutching the receipt. $500. Recurring. Who was A? Parker Fund. Why would a stranger on a bus give me a card linked to a trust fund? I walked back to my apartment, the orange eviction notice still searing a hole in my memory. I sat on my floor and tore into the rotisserie chicken, eating it with my bare hands like an animal. The food was warm and savory, and it made me want to cry. I looked at the card sitting on the floorboards next to me. Ashford Trust Services. The relief of having food in my belly was quickly replaced by a cold, creeping suspicion. My parents had just destroyed my life with financial instruments I didn't understand. Was this another trap? Was the old man working for them? Was this hush money? Or was it bait? I turned the card over. There was a toll-free number and a small ID code embossed in silver. HFT 41 AVA. The number 41, like the bus. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know who Leonard Ashford was, but as I sat there in the dark, wiping chicken grease from my lips, I realized one thing. My parents had cut off my income. They had cut off my credit. They had cut off my reputation. But someone had just given me the fuel to stay alive long enough to find out why. I sat on the floor of my studio apartment, the taste of the rotisserie chicken still greasy on my lips, and stared at the phone in my hand. The glow of the screen was the only light in the room. I had spent the last hour crying, then the hour before that eating like a starving animal, but now, a cold, crystalline clarity was settling over me. My parents had called me unstable. They had called me erratic. They had told the bank, the police, and my biggest client that I was the problem. It was a narrative they had constructed with terrifying speed and efficiency. But narratives take practice. You do not just wake up one Tuesday and perfectly execute a character assassination of your own daughter unless you have rehearsed the lines before. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Mason, my cousin. He was 24, a fresh-faced web designer who had just landed his first real job in Chicago 6 months ago. We weren't close, mostly just nodding at each other across the potato salad at family reunions. But I remembered something. I remembered a cryptic Facebook status he had posted last Thanksgiving about learning who you can really trust. I hit dial. It rang 4 times. Ava? Mason's voice sounded groggy. It was late in Chicago. Hey, Mason, I said, keeping my voice steady. I know this is weird. I know we never talk, but I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Is everything okay? No, I said. It's not. But before I tell you why, I need to know, did Aunt Paula ever ask to borrow money from you? There was a silence on the other end. It was a heavy, guilty silence. Mason, man, he sighed, the sound crackling with static. Look, I promised her I wouldn't say anything. She said it would embarrass Uncle Darren if the family knew. Let me guess, I said, my grip tightening on the phone. Was it for medical bills? An emergency procedure that insurance wouldn't cover. His kidneys, Mason whispered. She said he had a blockage. She said they were at the hospital admitting desk, and the credit card machine was down. She was crying. Ava, she sounded so scared. How much? Mason, $5,000, he said. It was my signing bonus. Every cent of it. I closed my eyes. $5,000. Did she pay you back? I asked her about it 3 months later, Mason said, his voice turning bitter. I had rent coming up, and she flipped on me. She told me that family doesn't count coins. She said she was disappointed that I was being so transactional when Uncle Darren was still recovering. She made me feel like I was some greedy little monster for wanting my own money back. She called you selfish, I said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, Mason said softly. Selfish and immature. Then Uncle Darren called me the next day. He didn't mention the money. He just said he was praying for my heart to soften. I felt so guilty I just stopped asking. He didn't have a kidney blockage. Mason, I said. He was playing golf that weekend. I saw the photos. The line went dead silent. Then I heard a sharp intake of breath. I'm going to kill them, Mason whispered. No, I said. You're going to send me the bank transfer receipts. Tonight? I hung up and immediately dialed the next number. This one was harder. Tessa, my older sister, the one who had stopped coming to Christmas 5 years ago. The one Paula always referred to as lost and bitter. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. Not since I had defended Mom during one of their arguments, telling Tessa she was being too hard on them. The guilt of that memory tasted like ash in my mouth. Tessa picked up on the second ring. What do you want? Ava? Her voice was sharp. Defensive armor already in place. You were right, I said. About what? Everything. The catering money for your wedding. The reason you left. Tessa didn't say anything for a long time. I could hear the background noise of a television, then the sound of a door closing as she stepped into a quieter room. Did they get you? She asked. Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was tired. They cleaned me out, I said. $11,800, plus credit card debt. They forged my identity. Tessa, they took everything. Welcome to the club, Tessa said dryly. Though you beat my high score, they only got me for $8,700. The catering. Mom insisted on handling the deposit, Tessa said. She wanted to be helpful. I wrote her the check, 2 weeks before the wedding. The caterer calls me saying they never got a dime. When I confronted Mom, she looked me dead in the eye and said she paid cash and the caterer was lying. Then she told Dad I was being paranoid. She told the aunts I was having pre-wedding jitters and acting irrational. Paranoid, I repeated. Irrational. Unstable, Tessa added. That's their favorite word, isn't it? It's the kill switch. As soon as you ask where the money went, you're unstable, you're having an episode, and because they are the saintly Darren and Paula Parker, Pillars of the community. Everyone believes them. Everyone believes the nice parents over the hysterical daughter. I'm not hysterical, I said, looking at the orange eviction notice on my floor. I'm furious. Good, Tessa said. Fury is useful. Sadness is just fuel for them. They feed on it. I spent the next 4 hours making calls. It was like pulling a loose thread on a sweater and watching the entire garment disintegrate in my hands. I called my great-aunt Ruth. She was 82 and lived in a nursing home 3 towns over. It took 20 minutes of small talk before she admitted, in a hushed, trembling voice, that she had given Paula a small inheritance check of $12,000 2 years ago. Paula had promised to invest it in a faith trust that yielded high interest for seniors. Ruth had never seen a statement. When she asked, Darren told her that, doubting the harvest stunts the growth. I called the Harrises, a sweet elderly couple from New Meadow Chapel, who always sent me birthday cards with $5 inside. Oh, Ava, Mrs. Harris chirped. We just love your parents' heart for the lost. We were so happy to support Darren's new charity, Clearstream Outreach. It is such a blessing to give. Did you give a lot, Mrs. Harris? I asked, my stomach churning. Well, we tithed our settlement money, she said proudly. $20,000. Darren said it was going to build a well in Guatemala. We haven't seen the pictures yet, but he says the construction crews are very slow down there. $20,000. I hung up the phone and opened my laptop. I didn't have internet, so I tethered it to my phone, watching my data limit creep toward the red. I opened a blank spreadsheet. I named the file, The Vampire Ledger. I started typing. Column A name, column B date, column C, the lie, column D, the amount, column E the smear, row 1 Mason Parker, kidney emergency, $5,000, selfish immature, row 2. Tessa Parker, catering deposit, $8,700, paranoid irrational, row 3. Aunt Ruth, faith trust investment, $12,000, doubting the spirit, row 4. The Harrises, Clearstream Outreach, $20,000. No smear yet. They are still being milked. Row 5. Ava Parker, Studio Fund/Identity Theft, $40,000 estimated. Unstable mental crisis. I looked at the total at the bottom of the screen. It was staggering. Nearly $86,000. And that was just the people I knew to call. That was just the family and the inner circle. This wasn't a desperate couple making bad choices. This wasn't a mistake. This was a business model. My parents weren't just bad with money. They were predators. They had a system. First, they identified a vulnerability: Mason's desire to be a good nephew, Tessa's wedding stress, Ruth's fear of running out of money, my desperation for approval. Then, they created a crisis or an opportunity. Then, they took the money. And the final step, the most crucial step, was the discredit. They didn't run away when they stole. They stayed right there. They used their reputation as a shield and turned the victim into the villain. If you complained, you were crazy. If you asked for receipts, you were ungrateful. They gaslighted an entire community into funding their lifestyle, and they had been doing it for years. I was just the fat pig they had saved for last. I sat back against the wall, the glow of the spreadsheet illuminating the sparse room. I felt sick, but it was a different kind of sickness than before. It wasn't fear, it was disgust. My computer pinged. A new email notification. I flinched, expecting another cancellation from a client or another threat from my landlord. But the sender was Ashford Trust Services. Subject action required. Account HFT 41 AVA. Dear Ms. Parker, our system indicates that the benefit card issued to you was activated today at Evergreen Market for a qualifying purchase of essentials. The transaction has triggered the automatic recurring reload protocol. We are writing to confirm that this card is currently in your possession and that you are the sole user. Given the specific nature of the hardship trust attached to this account, We also offer a confidential consultation for beneficiaries who may have questions regarding the origin of the funds or the security of their current environment. Please reply to schedule a secure call if desired. Sincerely, Lena Vance, Senior Case Manager, Ashford Trust Services. I read the email 3 times. The specific nature of the hardship trust, security of their current environment. This wasn't a standard automated email. This was coded language. This was someone reaching out a hand from the dark. I thought about the old man on the bus. Keep everything. He had said, noise dies, paper doesn't. He knew. He knew about the vampires. He knew about the gaslighting. He knew about the unstable daughter narrative. He had given me the card not just to feed me, but to flag me. I looked at the spreadsheet again. The rows of victims. The silent, shamed family members who had swallowed their losses because it was easier than fighting Darren and Paula Parker. If I walked away now, if I just took the grocery money and tried to rebuild quietly, I would be just like them. I would be row 5 on the spreadsheet, a statistic, and next year, there would be a row 6, maybe a cousin, maybe a neighbor, maybe another old lady in a nursing home. My parents were not going to stop. They were on a beach in Costa Rica right now, drinking cocktails paid for with my credit score, probably scanning the resort for their next mark. I typed a reply to Lena Vance. I have the card. I am the user. I want the call. Then I saved the spreadsheet. I backed it up to the cloud. I backed it up to a USB drive. I wasn't crying anymore. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Riverton. Somewhere out there, my parents were sleeping the sleep of the just, confident that their daughter was too broken, too poor, and too crazy to touch them. They were wrong. They had stolen my money. They had stolen my credit. They had stolen my reputation. But they had forgotten to steal my work ethic. I was a photo retoucher. My entire career was built on seeing the flaws that other people missed. I knew how to zoom in. I knew how to look at the raw data. I knew how to strip away the pretty layers and show the ugly truth underneath. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was an archivist, and I was about to build the most detailed portfolio of my life. 2 days later, I was standing in the living room of Jayla Ortiz's apartment, holding a box that contained the sum total of my earthly possessions. Jayla was my best friend from college, a woman who approached life with the ruthless efficiency of a spreadsheet macro. She was a data marketer for a logistics firm, drank her coffee black enough to dissolve a spoon, and had a tolerance for drama that hovered around 0. She stood in the doorway, wearing oversized sweatpants and a t-shirt that said, "Data doesn't lie, people do." She looked at the orange eviction notice I was clutching, then at the vampire ledger open on my laptop, then at the evergreen market card peeking out of my wallet. "Okay," Jayla said, stepping aside to let me in. "Crying time is over. You've been a victim for 72 hours. That's the statutory limit in this house. Now, this is a project." She didn't offer me a hug. She offered me wall space. Within 4 hours, Jayla's minimalist living room had been transformed into something that looked like the set of a serial killer documentary. We pushed her sofa against the far wall and covered the main white wall with butcher paper she had stolen from her office supply closet. "Visuals," Jayla commanded, slapping a roll of painter's tape into my hand. "You're a visual person. Put it up. All of it. I want to see the crime scene." I started printing. I used her high-end laser printer to churn out copies of everything. The bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals, the credit card alerts for the MacBook Pros, the Instagram photos of my parents sipping coconuts in Costa Rica, the receipt for the bespoke watch. We taped them up. "Okay, first order of business," Jayla said, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her laptop. "We are plugging the leaks. Hand me your phone." I gave it to her. She looked at it with disdain. "This number is compromised. If Paula knows your social, she probably knows the answer to your security questions too. What's your mother's maiden name? Ashford. Too easy. First pet probably Fluffy. We are locking it down." She drove me to a shady electronics store on 8th Street where we bought a prepaid burner phone with cash. Then we went to the library. Not my apartment. Not hers to access the internet. We changed every single password I owned: email, social media, obscure shopping accounts. We set up two-factor authentication to route exclusively to the burner phone. Next, Jayla said, you need a bank that isn't Westline. Westline is dead to us. We need something small, local, and annoying. We walked into Redwood Street Credit Union. It was a tiny branch that smelled like floor wax and had a teller named Barb who looked like she would personally fight anyone who tried to commit fraud. I opened a checking account with the $5 I had in my pocket. Paula and Darren wouldn't even know this place existed. Back at the apartment, the war room was taking shape. Jayla stood back, examining the wall of paper. She had color-coded everything with sticky notes. Blue is for family loans, she said, slapping a blue note on Mason's transcript about the kidney money. Green is for church donations, she added, putting a green note on the Harris's $20,000 well project. And red is for the nuclear option, identity theft, and credit fraud. She stepped back, crossing her arms. The wall was a kaleidoscope of betrayal. It's a pyramid, she muttered. Look at the dates. Aunt Ruth gave the inheritance money 2 years ago. That covers the down payment on the SUV. Then Tessa's wedding money. That was probably the kitchen renovation. Then the Harris money. That's the mission startup capital. And you. I'm the bailout, I whispered, staring at the red cluster of documents around my name. They ran out of liquid cash for the trip. They needed a quick infusion. So they burned me. They didn't just burn you, Jayla said, pointing to the email from Brightcart. They salted the earth. They made sure you couldn't fight back. That's not desperation. Ava, that's strategy. I picked up my camera. It was the one thing they hadn't stolen, mostly because it was 5 years old and battered. I started taking photos of the documents on the wall, not just snapshots. I treated them like product photography. I adjusted the lighting. I made sure the text on the bank statements was razor sharp. I framed the eviction notice next to the Instagram photo of Paula's designer sunglasses, so the contrast was visceral. What are you doing? Jayla asked, watching me work. I'm building the portfolio, I said, zooming in on Darren's signature on a credit card receipt. If I'm going to be an archivist, I'm going to be the best damn archivist they've ever seen. We decided to expand the circle. We created a private, encrypted group chat on an app called Signal. We named it the Ledger Circle. I added Mason. I added Tessa. I added Aunt Ruth's granddaughter, who monitored her email. I typed the first message. This is a safe space. No one judges you here. We are compiling evidence. If Paula or Darren Parker ever borrowed money from you, lied to you about where it went, or made you feel crazy for asking, put it here. For the first hour, it was silent. Then, a ping. It was Tessa. She uploaded a photo of a check carbon copy, catering deposit, $8,700, memo wedding joy, then Mason, a screenshot of a text conversation with Paula. Paula, your uncle is in so much pain. Please, Mason, just for a few weeks. Mason, okay, sent. Then, a surprise. A cousin I hadn't seen in 10 years. Brian. They told me they needed $4,000 for a legal defense against a contractor who scammed them. I never saw it again. When I asked, Darren told me I needed to forgive to be forgiven. The phone kept pinging. Blue notes. Green notes. Jayla was typing furiously on her laptop. I'm looking up this Clearstream outreach, she said, for a charity that raised 20 grand from the Harrises alone. Their digital footprint is invisible. No website, no 990 forms on GuideStar, just a P.O. box. She pulled up Google Maps and dropped a pin on the address listed on the brochure. It's a UPS store in a strip mall, she said. Classic? Dig deeper, I said, handing her a bowl of ramen. We had upgraded tonight. I used the Evergreen card to buy bok choy, green onions, and actual protein. It tasted like victory. I'm running a search on the address associated with the incorporation papers, Jayla said. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses. Hello? What is this? She turned the screen toward me. Horizon Path Consulting LLC. she read. Registered Agent Darren Parker, address the same UPS store box. What is Horizon Path? I asked. According to this filing, Jayla clicked a link. It is a management consultancy, and look at this revenue stream. Clearstream Outreach lists administrative services as its primary expense. And guess who they pay? Horizon Path, I said. Bingo, Jayla said, grinning a shark-like grin. The money goes into Clearstream from the donors, tax deductible. Then Clearstream hires Horizon Path to manage the charity. Horizon Path sends an invoice for 90% of the funds. Darren and Paula pay themselves a consulting fee. The money is now clean income. They buy the SUV, they buy the watch, and the Harrises think they are digging wells in Guatemala. It's a washing machine, I whispered. They built a machine to wash the money. And you, Jayla said, slurping a noodle, are building a machine to wash the truth. You're scrubbing the stain out. Ava. My burner phone buzzed on the coffee table. It wasn't a text. It was a voicemail notification. I picked it up, frowning. Who had this number? Only the bank, and I put it on speaker. Hello, Ms. Parker? This is Lena Vance from Ashford Trust Services. I'm following up on my email. We noticed the card activity has stabilized, which is good. However, we strongly encourage you to schedule that confidential call. The hardship benefit you are accessing is part of a legacy structure designed for specific family contingencies. We believe you might have questions regarding the benefactor. Please call us back at your earliest convenience. The room went quiet. Benefactor? Jayla asked, raising an eyebrow. Specific family contingencies. That sounds like lawyer speak for we know your family is messed up. It's the card, I said, pulling the evergreen card out of my wallet. The old man on the bus. He said to keep the paper. He knew. Who is he? Jayla asked. A relative. A rival. My mother's maiden name is Ashford, I said slowly. But she always told me her father died when she was 20. She said he was a bitter, angry man who drank himself to death and left them nothing. Jayla looked at the card, then at the wall of evidence, then at me. Paula said she paid the caterer cash, Jayla said. Paula said Darren had a kidney blockage. Paula said you were unstable. Paula lies, I finished. Exactly, Jayla said. If Paula said her father was a broke drunk who died 30 years ago, chances are he is actually a very rich, very alive man who hates her guts. I looked at the phone. The voicemail icon was still blinking. It feels like a trap, I said. What if they are working with them? What if this is how they find me? Ava, Jayla said, gesturing to the wall covered in proof of my financial ruin. You are living in my guest room sleeping on an air mattress. You have $22,000 in debt and a credit score that starts with a 5. What exactly do you have left to lose? She was right. The worst had already happened. The bomb had gone off. I was just standing in the crater. Call them, Jayla said, but put it on speaker, and I'm recording it. I took a deep breath. I dialed the number for Ashford Trust Services. It rang once. Ashford Trust. Lena Vance speaking, account HFT41. It's Ava, I said. I'm listening. Good, Lena said. Her voice was crisp, professional, but there was a warmth underneath it. We have been waiting for you to call. Ms. Parker, Mr. Ashford is very eager to see if you are as good at keeping records as he hopes you are. Who is Mr. Ashford? I asked. He is the man who sat next to you on the bus, Lena said. And he is the man who is going to help you burn that consulting firm to the ground. If you are ready. I looked at Jayla. She nodded. I'm ready, I said. Excellent, Lena said. Check your email. We just sent you a secure link. You might want to add a new color to your wall. Ms. Parker, maybe gold. I hung up. A new email appeared on Jayla's laptop. Subject: the Ashford Files. Section 1. I opened it. It wasn't a trap. It was a map. It was a list of shell companies, dates, incorporations. And at the top of the list was a name I recognized from the Vampire Ledger, Horizon Path Consulting. and right below it, a bank name I had never heard of before, Caldera International Bank. "Jayla," I said, my voice steady, "we are going to need more tape." Jayla made the call to Cormac Keegan at 8 in the morning, and he was at her door by 9 with a briefcase that looked older than I was. Cormac was a semi-retired forensic accountant who had spent 30 years chasing embezzlement for mid-sized insurance firms. He did not look like a detective. He looked like a high school geometry teacher who had given up on his students. He wore thick, bifocal glasses that magnified his eyes into owl-like proportions, and his beige cardigan smelled faintly of peppermint tea. He did not say hello. He simply walked into the apartment, looked at the wall covered in bank statements and photos, and let out a low, appreciative whistle. "Messy," Cormac said, his voice dry as dust. "But ambitious." For the next 3 hours, the only sounds in the room were the clicking of Cormac's calculator and the rustle of paper. He sat at Jayla's dining table, which was now groaning under the weight of the files we had compiled. He cross-referenced the vampire ledger with public tax filings, domain registrations, and the transaction histories I had pulled from my destroyed credit report. I sat in the corner, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, watching him work. I felt like a patient waiting for a diagnosis I already knew was terminal. Finally, Cormac took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He spun his laptop around so we could see the spreadsheet he had built. It was a complex web of arrows and boxes, far more sophisticated than our butcher paper wall. "You have been operating under the assumption that your parents are financially incompetent," Cormac said. "You think they are desperate people making bad choices to maintain a lifestyle they cannot afford. That is incorrect." He tapped the screen. "This is not a series of impulsive acts. Ava, this is a system. It is an engine." He pointed to the box labeled Clearstream Outreach. "Here is the intake," Cormac explained. "Your parents set up Clearstream as a non-profit religious organization. That allows them to accept tax-deductible donations from people like the Harrises and your church community. The money goes in tax-free. Now, look at the expenses." He slid a printout of a public 990 tax form across the table. "Line 14, he said. "Administrative and donor relations services, paid to an external vendor." I looked at the name of the vendor. Horizon Path Consulting LLC. "That is the shell," Jayla said, leaning in. "It is the extraction point," Cormac corrected. "Clearstream collects the money, then Clearstream hires Horizon Path to manage the charity. Horizon Path bills Clearstream for 90% of its revenue. The charity pays the bill. The charity now shows almost zero net income, which keeps the IRS happy because nonprofits aren't supposed to hoard cash. But the money hasn't disappeared. It has just moved rooms." He pointed to the box labeled Horizon Path. Horizon Path is a for-profit limited liability company. It is owned, quietly, by your father. Once the money is in Horizon Path, it is just business revenue. They pay themselves a salary, or better yet, they write off their lifestyle as business expenses. That SUV in the driveway company vehicle, that trip to Costa Rica market research, that watch executive appreciation gift. I felt sick. So when they told the Harrises their money was building a well, they were technically telling the truth, Cormac said, though his eyes were hard. They just didn't specify that the well was actually a slush fund for their retirement. "But here is the catch," Cormac continued, his finger moving to a column of red numbers. "Horizon Path reported gross receipts of only $18,000 last year to the state. That is barely poverty line. Yet, based on your ledger and the credit card theft, they are spending close to $6,000 a month. The math does not work, unless—" He paused for dramatic effect. Or maybe he was just tired. He tapped a few keys and brought up a new window. I did a deep trace on the routing number associated with the Horizon Path wire transfers. Most local banks use standard SWIFT codes. This one was routed through a correspondent bank in Miami. But the final destination is here. He pulled up a logo, a stylized volcano with a palm tree, Caldera International Bank. "Is that in Florida?" I asked. "No," Cormac said. "It is in Isla Caldera. It is a tiny, privately owned island jurisdiction in the Caribbean. It is not a banking center for commerce. It is a banking center for people who are tired of the American legal system. It is a non-extradition territory with absolute banking secrecy laws. The room went silent. Why would they need an offshore account? Jayla asked. They are grifting church ladies and their daughter, not a drug cartel. Because of the volume, Cormac said. I ran a conservative estimate. Between the family loans, the church donations, the mission appeals, and the credit fraud they pulled on you, I estimate they have cycled at least $200,000 through this system in the last 5 years. You don't keep $200,000 in a shoebox, and you don't keep it in a local credit union where the feds might ask questions about why a charity consultant is buying first-class tickets. You move it offshore. $200,000. I thought about my instant noodles. I thought about Aunt Ruth in the nursing home. I thought about Mason giving up his signing bonus. They are rich, I whispered. They aren't broke. They're rich. They are liquid, Cormac corrected. And they are mobile. He opened a new tab. It was a flight aggregator site. I have a contact at a travel data firm, Cormac said. I asked him to flag any upcoming itineraries for Darren and Paula Parker. We found this. He pointed to a reservation code. Flight 492, Riverton to Miami, Miami to San Jose, Costa Rica, departing next Tuesday. We know about Costa Rica, I said. The retreat? Look at the return flight, Cormac said. I looked. The field for return date was empty. There is no return flight, Cormac said grimly. And look at the connecting data. There is a private charter booking from San Jose to a small airfield in the Caribbean, handled by a broker linked to Caldera International. They aren't going on a retreat. Ava, they are cashing out. They're running, Jayla said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They maxed out your credit cards, drained the accounts, gathered the last harvest from the church, and now they are leaving. My heart was hammering against my ribs. If they leave, if they get to Isla Caldera, you will never see a dime, Cormac said, and you will be left with the debt. Lantern Bridge Finance will sue you, the landlord will evict you, and your parents will be sipping rum punch on a beach where no subpoena can touch them. My phone buzzed. It was the burner phone. I stared at it. It was the number for Ashford Trust Services. Answer it, Jayla said. Put it on speaker. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking. This is Ava. Hello, Ava, the voice said. It was Lena Vance. We received your confirmation. Mr. Ashford is pleased you are safe. However, we have detected some urgent activity on the account monitoring side regarding the subjects of your inquiry. My parents, I said. Yes, Lena said. Our internal risk assessment team, which monitors threats to beneficiaries, has flagged a significant liquidation of assets. We believe a departure is imminent. We know, I said. We just found the flight. Who is he? Lena. Who is Leonard Ashford? There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence. He is a very private man, Lena said carefully. He founded Ashford Logistics Group 40 years ago. You have probably seen the trucks on the interstate, the blue ones with the silver A. I froze. I saw those trucks every day. I had seen one this morning when I looked out the window. Massive 18-wheelers carrying the lifeblood of the economy. He is a billionaire, Jayla mouthed, her eyes wide. Leonard Ashford had one daughter, Lena continued, her voice softer now. Paula. He loved her very much, but 25 years ago, she married a man named Darren. Shortly after the wedding, Leonard discovered that Darren was attempting to divert funds from the company's pension plan into a personal investment vehicle. Leonard stopped it. He offered Paula a choice: leave the thief, or leave the inheritance. She left, I whispered. She chose Darren, Lena said, and she chose to tell everyone, including her children, that her father was a deadbeat who died of liver failure. She cut you off from him to punish him. She knew the only thing Leonard wanted was to know his grandchildren. The man on the bus, the fraying wool coat, the sadness in his gray eyes, Do not let them back you into a corner where you have to live in their story. He wasn't a stranger. He was my grandfather. He had been watching me. He had been riding the number 41 bus just to be near me, just to see if I had turned out like them. He is alive, I asked, my voice cracking. He is very much alive, Lena said. And he established the hardship trust specifically for this moment. He knew Darren's patterns. He knew eventually they would turn on their own children. The grocery card wasn't just charity. Ava, it was a tripwire. When you used it, it confirmed you were in distress. It activated the resources. What resources? I asked. Legal resources, Lena said. Forensic resources. We can help you. Ava. But we cannot fight this battle for you. Leonard believes that for you to truly be free of them, you have to be the one to break the cycle. You have to be the one to stop them. They leave on Tuesday, I said. They are going to an island with no extradition. Then you have 4 days, Lena said. If they get on that plane, they win. If they cross into international airspace, the money is gone, and your name stays ruined. I looked at Cormac. He was already typing, his face illuminated by the blue light of the laptop screen. I looked at Jayla. She was standing by the wall, holding a red marker, looking at me with fierce expectation. My parents were not just bad with money. They were thieves who had stolen 20 years of family connection. They had stolen my grandfather from me. They had painted him as a villain so they could play the victim. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my chest. It was heavier than anger. It was the weight of a judge's gavel. They aren't getting on that plane, I said into the phone. We were hoping you would say that, Lena replied. Mr. Ashford suggests you focus on the cafe. Paula has been emailing you, hasn't she? Yes, I said. She wants to meet. She wants to make peace. She wants to assess the threat, Lena corrected. She wants to see if you are broken enough to be ignored. Use that. Make her feel safe. Make her talk. I will, I said. I hung up the phone. The room was charged with electricity. Okay, Cormac said, closing his laptop with a snap. We have the financial trail. We have the flight logs. We have the motive. But we are missing one thing, the smoking gun. We need them to admit it. We need them to say the words. Paula wants to meet for coffee tomorrow, I said. She wants to play the grieving mother. Jayla walked over to her desk and opened a drawer. She pulled out a scarf. It was a thin, patterned silk scarf. She held it up to the light. Why are you showing me accessories? I asked. It's not an accessory, Jayla said, tossing it to me. Feel the hem. I ran my fingers along the edge of the silk. There was a tiny, hard lump, smaller than a grain of rice, sewn into the fabric. High-fidelity digital microphone, Jayla said. Battery life of 6 hours. Bluetooth connectivity to your burner phone. You wear this. You sit there, and you let her talk. You let her think she's winning. And when she brags because narcissists always brag, you get it on tape. I wrapped the scarf around my neck. It felt light, innocent. Riverton is a one-party consent state, Cormac noted, cleaning his glasses. As long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it. It is admissible in court. I looked at the flight itinerary on the screen one last time. Tuesday, 6 a.m., the clock was ticking. Every second that passed was a second closer to them vanishing with my future and the Harris' retirement and Aunt Ruth's legacy. Let's go to work, I said. I was done eating noodles. It was time to serve something else. The digital assault began on a Tuesday morning, and it was far more effective than any physical blow could have been. As the ledger circle grew, adding more cousins and short-changed church members to our encrypted chat, my mother decided to launch a preemptive nuclear strike. It arrived in the form of a mass email titled, Prayers for Ava, a Family in Crisis. I sat in Jayla's living room, watching the message propagate through my social circle like a virus. Paula had sent it to everyone, my extended family, the church elders, the neighbors on Elmridge Drive, and even a few of my professional contacts she had scavenged from my LinkedIn profile. Dear prayer warriors, it breaks a mother's heart to share this, but we are under attack, not from the outside, but from within. Our beloved daughter, Ava, has been struggling for some time with significant mental instability. We have tried to handle this privately, but recent events have forced us to ask for your grace. Ava has become obsessed with online conspiracy theories and has begun harassing us and other faithful members of the community with wild, paranoid accusations about money. We believe she is having a breakdown triggered by financial stress. Please, if she contacts you with manic stories or hurtful lies, do not engage. It only feeds her delusion. Just pray for her peace, and pray for us as we navigate this storm. In his grip, Paula and Darren. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. In 3 paragraphs, she had inoculated the entire town against the truth. She had turned my evidence into delusions and my investigation into harassment. The fallout was immediate and brutal. My phone, which had been quiet, started buzzing with notifications not with support, but with pity. A neighbor I had known since kindergarten blocked me on Facebook. A freelance client I had been trying to woo sent a stiff email rescinding a job offer, citing potential conflicts. Then came the text from Aunt Carol, Paula's sister, who lived in Ohio. She forwarded me the email with a single line of commentary. I hope you find the peace you are looking for. Ava, please get help. I threw the phone onto the sofa, feeling the tears prick at my eyes. It was suffocating. I was screaming the truth into a void, and my mother was filling that void with cotton and chloroform. Don't you dare cry, Jayla said from the kitchen, where she was aggressively chopping carrots. This is good. This means they are scared. You don't fire the heavy artillery unless the enemy is at the gates. They're turning everyone against me, I said, my voice trembling. Even if we prove the fraud, half these people will just think I'm the crazy daughter who ruined the ministry. Then we don't just prove the fraud, Jayla said, pointing the knife at me. We make her confess it. 2 hours later, the second phase of Paula's strategy landed. A personal email, sent just to me. The subject line was simply, Coffee Ava. I know you are hurting. I know you are confused. Daddy is very angry, but I'm just heartbroken. I want to see you. No lawyers, no shouting, no drama. Just mother and daughter. Let's meet at the Daily Grind downtown at 10 tomorrow. Please, let me help you understand. I showed it to Cormac. He adjusted his thick glasses, reading the screen with the clinical detachment of a surgeon. She is fishing, Cormac said. She wants to assess the threat level. She wants to look in your eyes and see if you are actually dangerous, or if you are just a broke girl flailing around. She wants to see if her email worked. Should I go? I asked. Absolutely, Cormac said. But you are not going as the investigator. You are going as the victim. You need to be small. Ava, you need to be apologetic. You need to be exactly the unstable, confused child she described in that email. If she feels safe, she will talk. And if she talks, she might slip. Jayla walked over to the table and picked up the silk scarf we had tested earlier, the one with the high-fidelity microphone sewn into the hem. Riverton is a one-party consent state, she reminded me, draping the fabric around my neck. As long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it. It is legal. It is admissible. I have to lie to her, I whispered, touching the hidden lump of plastic in the silk. She stole $40,000 from you and told the world you were crazy, Jayla said, her eyes hard. You aren't lying, Ava. You're acting. I spent the rest of the night rehearsing. I practiced stammering. I practiced looking down at my hands. I practiced the art of being the disappointment my parents needed me to be. The next morning, the Daily Grind was bustling with the mid-morning rush. It was a hipster spot with exposed brick walls and the sound of espresso machines hissing over indie folk music. I spotted Paula immediately. She was sitting at a corner table, away from the window. She was dressed for the role of the grieving mother. Gone were the silk robes and the flashy jewelry. She was wearing a beige cardigan and simple slacks. Her makeup was minimal, designed to make her look tired, saintly, and burdened. I took a deep breath, reached up to adjust the scarf to ensure the mic was unobstructed, and tapped the record button on the app linked to my burner phone. I walked over. Mom. Paula looked up, her eyes instantly filled with that practiced, glistening moisture. She stood up and enveloped me in a hug that smelled of expensive perfume, the one thing she hadn't sacrificed for the performance. "Oh, Ava," she sighed into my ear. "My poor, sweet girl." I let my shoulders slump. I let myself go limp in her arms. "I'm so tired." "Mom," I said, and it wasn't even a lie. We sat down. She reached across the table and took my hands in hers. Her palms were warm and soft, the hands of a woman who hadn't done manual labor in 30 years. "I am so glad you came," she said softly. "Daddy didn't want me to. He thinks you are too far gone. But I told him, that is my baby. That is my daughter. The devil is trying to put a wedge between us. Ava, he is using money to divide a family." "I don't want to fight," I said, staring at our joined hands. I looked at my bank account, Mom, and everything was gone. And then the eviction notice came. I panicked. I didn't know what to think. "Of course you panicked," Paula soothed, stroking my thumb. "You are under so much pressure. That studio, the freelance life. It is too much for you. We told you that. We borrowed that money to relieve the pressure. Don't you see? We were going to double it. We were going to give it back to you as a surprise gift when the harvest came in." "But the charges," I said, pitching my voice to sound whiny and confused, not accusatory. "The watch, the luggage, it looked like spending." Paula smiled, a sad, benevolent smile. "That is the problem with the world, Ava. It judges the surface. That watch, it opens doors. That luggage, it shows the international partners that we are serious. You have to look successful to be successful for the kingdom. We are doing this for the mission." "The Costa Rica mission?" I asked. "Yes," she said, her eyes lighting up. "It is going to be magnificent. Ava, a spiritual retreat center. We have donors from all over the globe lining up. It is a massive undertaking. That is why the finances are so fluid right now." "It sounds complicated," I said, widening my eyes. "I saw the flight itinerary. You're going to San Jose." She stiffened slightly, just for a fraction of a second. "Yes, to meet with the architects. And then you have another flight," I said, keeping my tone innocent. "To an island I saw something about a charter." Paula squeezed my hand, a little harder this time. "The ministry is expanding. Ava, we have partners in many regions. We have to be where the Spirit leads." "Is that why you have the other bank account?" I asked. Paula froze. "What bank account?" I pulled my hand away and picked up my coffee cup, trying to hide the trembling in my fingers. This was the pivot. This was the moment Cormac had scripted. "I went to the UPS store," I lied, "to see if maybe there was a check for me in the Clearstream box. The clerk gave me a letter by mistake. It was addressed to Horizon Path, from a bank, Caldera International." The change in Paula's face was terrifying. The saintly mask evaporated. The sadness vanished. In its place was a cold, reptilian fury. Her eyes narrowed, and her mouth became a thin, hard line. "You went to the box," she hissed. The volume of her voice didn't rise, but the intensity spiked. "You have been snooping." "I was just looking for my money," I stammered, leaning back. "I just saw the name, Caldera. It sounded tropical. Is that where the mission is?" "You little spy," Paula spat. She looked around the cafe to make sure no one was listening, then leaned over the table, her voice a venomous whisper. "You have no right at all. That is ministry business. That is confidential donor information." "But why is it in an offshore bank?" I asked, pushing just a little harder. "The letter said something about non-extradition protocols. Is that normal for a church?" "It is for our protection," Paula snapped. "You don't understand how the world works. Ava, you with your little photo edits and your instant noodles. High-level finance requires privacy. We have enemies. We have people who want to destroy God's work with taxes and regulations. We use flexible institutions because we have to. So the money is there, I asked. My money. The Harris family's money. It is God's money, Paula said. Her voice rising enough that a woman at the next table glanced over. Paula lowered her voice again. Her face flushed with anger. And yes, it is safe, far away from people like you, who would waste it on rent for a shoebox apartment. We are building an empire, Ava, and you are trying to burn it down because you are jealous. I'm not jealous, I said quietly. I'm broke. I'm eating groceries from a charity card. Paula rolled her eyes. Oh, please, that card. She let out a scoffing laugh. I should have known you would keep using that. I told Darren we should have intercepted it. My heart stopped. You know about the card. Of course I know, Paula sneered. Evergreen Market, the little green logo. It's his signature move. He thinks he is so noble. Who? I asked. The old man. Leonard, Paula said, saying the name like it was a curse word. Your grandfather, the man who thinks he is better than us just because he hoards his millions in a trust instead of enjoying life. You told me he was dead, I said. The mic was right there. I needed her to say it clearly. You told me he died of liver failure 20 years ago. He is dead to us, Paula said coldly. He cut us off. Ava, 25 years ago. He looked at Darren, a man of vision, and called him a crook. He withheld my inheritance. He tried to bribe me to leave my husband. So yes, I killed him. In our story. He is dead. It was cleaner that way. She looked at me with pure disgust. And now he is feeding you, she said. He must be laughing his head off. He found you, the weak link. He slid that card to you just to spite me. He wants to turn you into his little soldier. He just gave me food, Mom, I said. He gave you a wedge, Paula corrected. He thinks he can use you to get to us. Well, tell him it won't work. Tell him we are leaving. Tell him by the time he files his little motions, we will be gone. And you will be here, paying off your debt, rotting in Riverton. She stood up, smoothing down her beige cardigan. The grieving mother act was completely gone. She looked like a CEO who had just fired an incompetent employee. I came here to offer you peace, she said. I was going to write you a check for $500, just to help you out. But now you get nothing. You are ungrateful. Ava, you are a spy, and you are no daughter of mine. She threw a $20 bill on the table for the coffee money that was probably stolen from my savings account and walked out of the cafe. I sat there for a long time, staring at the bill. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard, I thought it might bruise the skin. I could feel the sweat trickling down my back under the silk scarf. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. I stopped the recording. I saw the file save. Audio 001.wave. 22 minutes long. She had admitted everything. She had confirmed the offshore bank. She had confirmed Horizon Path was a shell. She had confirmed they were leaving the country to avoid taxes and regulations. And she had confirmed that Leonard Ashford was alive, that she had lied about his death to hide her disinheritance, and that she knew exactly what the Evergreen card represented. It wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a confession. I picked up the $20 bill Paula had left. I folded it neatly and put it in my pocket. Thanks for the coffee, Mom, I whispered to the empty chair. Then I stood up and walked out into the sunshine. I needed to get to the war room. We had a file to send to the Attorney General. We called it Project Noodle File 41. It was Cormac's idea. He said every case needed a name that grounded it in reality, something that reminded you of the stakes. For me, the stakes were those mornings on the number 41 bus, eating sodium-rich sludge because my parents had decided their need for a tropical retreat outweighed my need for basic sustenance. Cormac sat at Jayla's dining table, which had been converted into a command center of paper stacks and laptop cables. He was no longer the semi-retired accountant in a cardigan. He was a surgeon preparing to amputate a gangrenous limb. He compiled the data into a single, terrifyingly concise PDF document. It contained the flow of funds diagram, The tax returns showing zero income for the charity, the bank statements from Horizon Path, the flight itinerary to Isla Caldera, and the audio file from the cafe where Paula confessed to tax evasion and hiding assets offshore. "We do not send this to the local beat cops," Cormac said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "We go for the jugular, the State Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit, the IRS Whistleblower Office, and Detective Mira Collins at the Riverton Police Department." "Why Collins?" Jayla asked. "I thought the local cops were useless." "The beat cops are useless," Cormac corrected. "Collins is a financial crimes detective. She is young, she is ambitious, and she hates being embarrassed. When she sees that the AG is getting this file, she will not want to be the local officer who let a $200,000 fraud ring fly out of her jurisdiction." He hit send. The file was encrypted, password protected, and lethal, but I had my own work to do. While Cormac handled the law, I handled the court of public opinion. I opened a new document and began assembling what I called the honor packet. It was a simple PDF. Page 1 was a screenshot of Paula's mass email, prayers for Ava, where she called me unstable and paranoid. Page 2 was a high-resolution scan of the receipt for the $3,600 bespoke watch. Page 3 was the invoice for the luxury luggage. Page 4 was a side-by-side comparison of my empty savings account and their Instagram photo sipping cocktails in Costa Rica. I sent the honor packet to the Board of Elders at New Meadow Chapel. I sent it to the church treasurer. I sent it to every single person who had emailed me telling me to find peace. And attached to it were the notarized letters from the Ledger Circle Mason story about the fake kidney blockage, Tessa's stolen wedding money, and Aunt Ruth's vanished inheritance. "And send," I whispered, hitting the button. The first hour was agonizingly silent. It was the silence of a room after a grenade has been thrown, but before the pin strikes the floor. I paced the length of Jayla's apartment, my stomach churning. Had we overplayed our hand, would they circle the wagons? Then, Jayla's dashboard monitor lit up. "We have movement," she said, leaning in. I set up a tracking pixel in the emails sent to the church board. They aren't just opening it, they are forwarding it, rapidly. She spun the screen around. The email threads were exploding. We couldn't read the content, but we could see the subject lines and the metadata tags. Re-urgent, liability concerns, re-forensic audit request, re-immediate suspension protocol. "They aren't defending him," Jayla said, a vicious grin spreading across her face. "They are panicking. They see the words offshore bank and tax fraud, and they are realizing that if they don't cut Darren loose, they are going down as accomplices." The phone rang. It wasn't my burner. It was Cormac's cell. He answered it on the first ring, putting it on speaker. "Keegan speaking. Mr. Keegan, this is Assistant Attorney General Davila," a sharp male voice said. "I am looking at a file you sent over regarding a Clearstream outreach, Noodle File 41. Are you the primary on this? I am the forensic consultant for the victim, Ava Parker," Cormac said, his voice steady. "The victim is with me." "This audio recording," Davila said. "The admission of the account at Caldera International. Can you verify the chain of custody? Recorded yesterday in a one-party consent environment, authenticated metadata included." "Okay," Davila said. "That changes things. We usually don't touch family disputes, but offshore movement triggers federal interest. We are going to reach out to Riverton PD to coordinate. We don't want these subjects leaving the jurisdiction." Cormac hung up and looked at us. "The gears are turning." 10 minutes later, my burner phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. "This is Detective Collins," a woman's voice said. She sounded breathless, like she was walking fast. "I just got off the phone with the AG's office. Ms. Parker, I need you to come in, now." We drove to the station. Detective Mira Collins met us in a small interrogation room. She was younger than I expected, wearing a sharp blazer and an expression of intense calculation. I knew that Darren played golf with her boss, the precinct captain, I knew that in a small town like Riverton, protecting the local pastor was usually the default setting, but Collins was looking at the file Cormac had prepared. She was looking at the flight itinerary for next Tuesday. "They are leaving in 4 days," Collins said, tapping the paper. "One-way charter to the Caribbean." "Yes," I said, "and they are taking my money, the Harris's retirement, and the church's building fund with them." Collins looked at me, then at the file, then at the door where her captain's office was located down the hall. I could see the wheels turning. If she protected Darren and he fled, the AG would roast her. If she nailed him, she was the hero who stopped a massive fraud. She made her choice. "I can't arrest them yet," Collins said, her voice dropping. "The DA needs more time to process the indictment on the fraud charges, but based on the flight logs and the offshore accounts, I can articulate an immediate flight risk. I can get a judge to sign an emergency asset freeze order." "Do it," I said. "I'm filing it now," Collins said, standing up. "We are freezing Clearstream, Horizon Path, and their personal accounts. If they try to buy a stick of gum in the next hour, the card will decline." While Collins was sprinting to the courthouse, the dominoes outside the legal system began to fall with a deafening crash. The New Meadow Chapel board released a statement. It was emailed to the entire congregation, and thanks to the Ledger Circle, I got a copy within minutes. "Dear church family, in light of serious and credible allegations regarding financial irregularities, the Board of Elders has voted unanimously to place Pastor Darren Parker and Ministry Director Paula Parker on immediate administrative leave. Effective immediately, we have retained an external forensic auditing firm to conduct a review of all Clearstream outreach accounts for the past 5 years. We are cooperating fully with local authorities. Please pray for truth and justice." It was a polite way of saying, "We are throwing them to the wolves." Then the Harrises stepped up, the sweet old couple who had given $20,000 for a well in Guatemala. I had spoken to them that morning, and they had been hesitant. But after seeing the honor packet, after seeing the watch and the luxury retreat while their well remained unbuilt, their sadness turned into a righteous, elderly fury. They went to their bank with a notary. They signed an affidavit stating that they were solicited for charitable funds that were diverted for personal use. When a sweet, grandmotherly figure files a sworn statement that the local pastor scammed her, the family dispute narrative dies instantly. It becomes elder abuse, and nobody defends an elder abuser. My phone buzzed again. An email from Lantern Bridge Finance. Subject dispute resolution. Account closed. Parker. Regarding your claim of identity theft and the unauthorized loan of $22,000, upon review of the police report and the new information provided regarding the fraudulent application IP address, we have closed this account. The debt has been forgiven. We have sent a request to the credit bureaus to remove the trade line from your report immediately. We apologize for the distress. I stared at the screen. $22,000. Gone. Just like that. Lantern Bridge didn't care about justice. They cared that the Attorney General was sniffing around. They saw the ship sinking and they scrubbed my name off the passenger list to avoid being sued as an accessory. Then Westline Bank, the same bank that had told me it was a civil matter 3 days ago. Incoming call Westline branch manager. "Ms. Parker," Sarah the manager said, her voice tight and nervous. "We received a subpoena from the AG's office regarding the accounts of Darren and Paula Parker. We have also reviewed your fraud claim again, given the extenuating circumstances and the evidence of coercion. We are issuing a provisional credit for the full amount of $11,800 to your account, pending the final investigation." "You told me it was a civil matter," I said, my voice cold. "We were unaware of the scope of the situation," Sarah stammered. "The funds should be available in your account by tomorrow morning." I hung up. I didn't thank her. I looked at Jayla and Cormac. "They are folding. All of them." "That is what institutions do," Cormac said, closing a folder. "They protect the money until the risk of keeping it outweighs the risk of returning it. You just became the higher risk. But the final domino was the most personal. Paula, stripped of her church position, her bank accounts frozen, and her reputation in tatters, did the only thing she knew how to do. She went on camera. A notification popped up on Facebook. Paula Parker is live. I clicked it. We all gathered around the laptop. Paula was sitting in her kitchen. The lighting was dim. She wasn't wearing makeup. She looked genuinely haggard, though I knew half of it was stagecraft. "Friends," Paula said, wiping a tear from her eye. "I don't know what is happening. We are being persecuted. Darren and I have given our lives to this community, and now malicious lies are being spread by someone we love. We have been locked out of our accounts. We can't even buy groceries." She looked into the camera, channeling every ounce of victimhood she possessed. "They are trying to silence the ministry," she sobbed. "They are attacking God's work. Please, don't believe the rumors. We are innocent." Usually, a video like this would be flooded with heart emojis and praying for you comments. But not today. I watched the comments roll in. The honor packet had done its work. The truth had inoculated the town. Comment from Susan Miller. "Paula, I saw the receipt for a $3,000 watch. Did the ministry need that?" Comment from Brian Cousin. "What about the $4,000 for the legal defense that never happened? Stop lying." Aunt Paula. Comment from Mrs. Gable Neighbor. "Show us the audit. Paula, if you are innocent, show us the bank statements. Where's the money for the well?" Comment from Anonymous. "My mother gave you her pension check. Shame on you." Paula's eyes darted to the screen. She saw the comments. She saw the tide turning. She saw that the script wasn't working anymore. The audience had seen the backstage. She ended the live stream abruptly. The screen went black. I sat back in my chair, letting out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my lungs for 20 years. "They are trapped," Jayla said quietly. "No money, no church, no friends, and Flight 492 leaves on Tuesday. But they can't pay for the gas to get to the airport." "It's not over yet," Cormac warned. "A cornered animal is the most dangerous. They have one move left." "What move?" I asked. "Desperation," Cormac said. "And Margaret Lane?" "My grandmother, Paula's mother. The only person left in the family with assets they hadn't drained yet. They are going to try to get to her," I said, standing up. "They need cash to run, and she is the last piggy bank." "Then we need to get to court," Cormac said. "Tomorrow. The freeze order is temporary. We need to make it permanent, and we need to make sure Leonard Ashford is there." I touched the evergreen card in my pocket. "He'll be there," I said. "He's been waiting 25 years for this." The courtroom was nothing like the dramas I had watched on late-night television. There was no mahogany paneling, no dramatic lighting, and no gallery packed with gasping spectators. Room 304 of the Riverton Civil Court was a windowless box with scuffed linoleum floors, buzzing fluorescent lights that gave everyone a sickly greenish tint, and a smell that was a mix of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Alana Drew, a sharp-edged pro bono attorney Cormac had recruited from a firm that specialized in elder abuse recovery. Alana was 20 years my senior, and she emanated a vibration of calm competence that I desperately needed. My hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles were white. I wasn't holding a prepared speech. I was clutching the physical copy of Noodle File 41, a binder 3 inches thick containing every lie my parents had told in the last 5 years. Across the aisle, at the defense table, sat Darren and Paula. They looked diminished. Without the stage lights of the church, without the designer clothes which were currently locked in their house by a temporary restraining order, and without the adoration of a crowd. They looked small. Paula was wearing a gray cardigan that was pilling at the sleeves. Darren was hunched over, his usually perfectly coiffed hair looking thin and flat. They didn't look like the power couple of Lakefield Hills. They looked like two middle-aged people who had been caught trying to sneak out of a restaurant without paying the bill, but their lawyer, a man named Mr. Gallo, with an expensive suit and a condescending smile, was fighting hard. "Your Honor," Gallo said, gesturing toward me with a pitying, open hand, We are not denying that the family finances are complex. Ministry work often is. But to characterize this as fraud is a gross overreach. This is a tragedy of mental health. We have a daughter, Ms. Parker, who has a documented history of instability, who has lashed out against her loving parents because of her own professional failures. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. My clients are heartbroken, Gallo continued. They are not flight risks. They are community leaders. And frankly, this temporary asset freeze is preventing them from caring for the true victim here, Mrs. Margaret Lane, Paula's mother, an elderly woman who depends on Darren and Paula for her daily care and financial management. We are asking the court to lift the freeze and grant my clients emergency guardianship over Mrs. Lane's estate so they can ensure her well-being. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline in my chest. They were trying to pivot. They knew Clearstream was burned. They knew the offshore money was frozen. So they were going for the last liquid asset left. My grandmother. They don't want to care for her, I whispered to Alana. They want to liquidate her. Hush, Alana said softly, writing a note on her legal pad. Let him dig the hole. Judge Vance, a woman with steel-gray hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, flipped through the pages of the motion. She looked bored, but her eyes were sharp. Mr. Gallo, the judge said, her voice dry. I have a forensic report here from the Attorney General's office detailing transfers to a bank in Isla Caldera. That doesn't look like ministry work. That looks like a getaway car. A misunderstanding of international banking protocols, Your Honor, Gallo said smoothly, which we can clarify if given time, but right now, the priority is Mrs. Lane. She is alone. She needs her family. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened with a heavy thud. The bailiff looked up, annoyed. The court clerk, a young man who had been typing furiously, stopped and pressed a hand to his earpiece. He listened for a moment, his eyes widening, and then he stood up and leaned over to whisper something to Judge Vance. The judge frowned. She looked up from the file, over the heads of the lawyers, to the back of the room. We have a disruption, the judge asked. Not a disruption, Your Honor, the clerk said, his voice projecting in the quiet room. An interested party with standing has just filed an emergency motion to intervene. He is requesting permission to address the court regarding the guardianship of Margaret Lane. Who is it? Gallo snapped, looking around. We haven't been notified of any other kin. The judge looked at the piece of paper the clerk handed her. She raised her eyebrows, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing her face. The intervener is Mr. Leonard Ashford, the judge read. A sound tore out of my mother's throat. It wasn't a word. It was a strangled, wet gasp, like she had been physically struck in the solar plexus. I turned around in my chair. Standing at the railing that separated the gallery from the court floor was the man from the bus. He was wearing the same fraying wool coat. He held the same battered flat cap in his hands. But the way he stood was different. On the bus, he had been quiet, blending into the gray morning. Here, he stood with the posture of a man who owned the building. His eyes, cool and piercingly gray, were fixed not on me, but on the defense table. Darren had turned the color of old paper. He was gripping the table edge so hard his fingernails were digging into the wood. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. Mr. Ashford, the judge asked, peering over her glasses. Please approach the bench. Leonard opened the gate and walked down the center aisle. His steps were slow, measured, and heavy. He didn't look at Paula, who was now trembling violently, her hand pressed over her mouth. State your name and relation to the case for the record, the judge said. Leonard James Ashford, he said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and filled the room without the need for a microphone. Founder and chairman of Ashford Logistics Group, I am the husband of Margaret Lane, and I am the father of the defendant, Paula Parker. Objection. Gallo stood up, looking confused. My clients have stated on multiple record filings that Paula Parker's father is deceased, died 20 years ago. Leonard turned his head slowly to look at Gallo. It was the look a lion might give a particularly annoying fly. "I assure you, counselor," Leonard said, "I am very much alive, though my daughter has found it convenient to bury me metaphorically for the last quarter century." He turned back to the judge. 25 years ago, Your Honor, I discovered that my son-in-law, Darren Parker, was attempting to divert funds from my company's employee pension plan into a private investment vehicle he controlled. It was a clumsy scheme, but it showed intent. I gave my daughter a choice. She could leave the thief and keep her place in the family, or she could stay with him and be cut off from the Ashford fortune entirely. Leonard paused, and for a second, the steel in his voice wavered, revealing a deep, ancient wound. "She chose the thief," he said, and to save face, to explain why they were not living the billionaire lifestyle she felt entitled to. "She told everyone I was a drunk who drank himself to death. She killed me to hide her shame." The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing for a second. "And why are you here today, Mr. Ashford?" the judge asked gently. "Because they are trying to do to my wife what they tried to do to my company, and what they have successfully done to my granddaughter," Leonard said. He reached into his battered coat and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He placed it on the judge's bench with a heavy thud. "I have been watching them, Your Honor, from a distance. I have logs of every attempt Darren has made to secure power of attorney over Margaret using forged signatures. I have emails intercepted by my security team where they discuss using shell companies like Clearstream to launder donations, and I have proof that they have been using my name, the Ashford name, to solicit special private donations from investors, claiming they were managing a secret family charity." Judge Vance opened the envelope. She pulled out a stack of documents. Her eyes scanned them, widening with every page. "This is," she murmured, "this is a systemic pattern." "It is a lifestyle," Leonard corrected. He turned then, finally, to look at me. His expression softened, the hard lines around his eyes crinkled. "And then there is Ava," he said, "my granddaughter, whom I was never allowed to meet." "Mr. Ashford," Gallo interrupted, trying to regain control, "this is all very touching, but what does it have to do with the current asset freeze, Ms. Parker is an adult. Her financial mismanagement is her own." "Is it?" Leonard asked. He reached into his pocket again. He pulled out a duplicate of the card he had given me, the Evergreen Market card. "I established the Ashford Hardship Trust 10 years ago," Leonard told the court. "It is a blind trust, designed to monitor the financial health of my estranged grandchildren without alerting their parents. I knew, Your Honor, I knew that people like Darren and Paula do not stop. I knew that eventually they would run out of strangers to scam, and they would turn on their own blood." He held up the card. "This is not a gift card," Leonard said. "It is a diagnostic tool. It is linked to a predictive algorithm in the trust's banking core. When a beneficiary's personal savings are depleted rapidly, specifically via transfers to known high-risk entities, and that beneficiary simultaneously uses this card for basic caloric survival, staple foods, not luxuries, it triggers a level 1 alert." He looked at me. "I received the alert 3 weeks ago," Leonard said. "Ava's life savings were drained. Her credit utilization spiked to 100%. And she was buying instant noodles with a card I deployed as a safety net." "So you intervened?" the judge asked. "I observed," Leonard said. "I needed to know who she was. I needed to know if she was a Parker or if she was an Ashford, so I rode the number 41 bus. I sat next to her while she looked at her empty bank account." He walked a few steps closer to the plaintiff's table. "I told her to keep the paper," Leonard said. "I told her that noise dies. But paper doesn't. A Parker would have screamed. A Parker would have made a scene. A Parker would have tried to manipulate the situation." He pointed a finger at me. "She didn't scream," Leonard said, his voice filled with a quiet, fierce pride. "She organized. She ate the noodles. She took the card. And she built a case file that rivals what my own forensic team produced. She didn't ask for a handout. She asked for justice." He turned back to the judge. "These two," Leonard said, gesturing to my parents without even looking at them, "are not guardians. They are parasites. They have consumed their congregation. They have consumed their daughter's future. And if you lift this freeze, they will consume my wife's remaining years. I am asking the court to grant permanent injunctive relief, to appoint an independent guardian for Margaret Lane, and to turn over all evidence to the district attorney for criminal prosecution." Paula let out a sob. "Daddy, please," she wailed. "We were just trying to build something. We did it for the family." Leonard didn't flinch. "You did it for the vanity," he said, cold as ice. "And you are not my family. She is—" He nodded at me. Judge Vance closed the file. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked at the frozen, terrified figures of Darren and Paula, and then she looked at the mountain of evidence on her desk, my noodle file on one side, Leonard's surveillance dossier on the other, 2 generations of receipts, converging on the same truth. "The evidence before this court," Judge Vance said, her voice ringing with finality, "is overwhelming. The defense's claim of a family dispute is rejected. The court finds credible and immediate evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse." She picked up her gavel. "The temporary asset freeze is hereby made permanent. The request for guardianship of Margaret Lane by the defendants is denied with prejudice. Mr. Ashford, the court accepts your petition to fund an independent guardian." She looked at Collins, who was standing at the back of the room. "Detective Collins," the judge said, "I believe the district attorney has enough here to proceed. I am remanding the defendants into custody pending their arraignment on criminal charges. Flight risk is established." The gavel came down. Bang. It was the loudest, most beautiful sound I had ever heard. 2 bailiffs moved toward the defense table. Darren stood up, looking like he was about to vomit. Paula was clinging to his arm, weeping loudly, looking at the gallery for an audience that wasn't there. As they were led away, handcuffed and stumbling, Paula looked back, not at me, at Leonard. "I hate you," she screamed, the mask finally slipping completely. "I hate you." Leonard didn't speak. He just watched them go, his face an unreadable mask of sorrow and resolve. When the doors closed behind them, the silence rushed back into the room. Alana squeezed my arm. "You did it, Ava. It's over." I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my spine was straight. I gathered up Noodle File 41. Leonard was waiting for me by the gate. Up close, he looked older than he had on the bus. The weight of condemning his own daughter was sitting heavy on his shoulders. "You kept the paper," he said softly. "I kept the paper," I replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. It was heavy, cream-colored stock. "Ashford Logistics Group." "The Noodles," he said, a small, dry smile touching his lips. "Were they terrible?" "The worst," I said. "Salty and cold." "Good," Leonard said. "You will never have to eat them again, unless you want to." He offered me his arm. "Come on, Ava," he said. "Let's go get some real lunch. I believe we have 25 years of catching up to do." I took his arm. We walked out of the courtroom together, leaving the fluorescent lights behind, stepping out into the clear, honest light of the afternoon. The gavel did not bang. It fell with a heavy, dull thud that sounded like a casket closing. Judge Vance did not shout. She spoke with the terrifying, quiet authority of the state, and every word she said tightened the noose around my parents' financial necks. The temporary asset freeze was converted into a permanent injunction. It was comprehensive. It covered the domestic accounts at Westline Bank. It covered the shell accounts for Clearstream Outreach. It covered the hidden accounts for Horizon Path Consulting. And most devastating of all, it covered the accounts at Caldera International. The judge looked over her spectacles at Darren and Paula, who were sitting in stunned silence at the defense table. She ordered them to surrender their passports to the court clerk before leaving the building. She issued a protective order prohibiting them from accessing any digital forum, church newsletter, or social media platform to discuss the case, the victims, or the ministry. They were effectively gagged. Then came the ruling on my grandmother. The court appointed a neutral, state-vetted professional guardian to manage the estate of Margaret Lane. Darren was permanently barred from holding any fiduciary role for her, or indeed for any charitable organization, until the conclusion of the criminal proceedings. It was a complete dismantling. In 20 minutes, the judge had stripped them of their money, their travel plans, their platform, and their future prey. Outside the courtroom, the gears of justice continued to grind with a satisfying crunch. Detective Collins met us in the hallway, holding a thin file folder. She looked tired, but triumphant. "We got the logs," Collins said, handing a copy to Cormac. Caldera International folded. The AG threatened to blacklist them from the U.S. banking correspondence network if they didn't comply with the subpoena. They chose their business over your parents' privacy. Cormac opened the file. He ran a finger down the columns of numbers. "It matches," he said, his voice low. "Dollar for dollar. The donations went in on Monday. The lifestyle expenses went out on Tuesday. The transfers to the offshore holding company happened on Friday. It is exactly as we modeled in the flowchart." "We have the warrant," Collins said. "We are executing it now." I watched from the window of the courthouse as two uniformed officers approached Darren and Paula near the parking lot. There were no cameras. There was no drama. It was just a quiet conversation. The flash of silver handcuffs, and the slump of two people who realized the performance was finally over. They were placed in the back of a squad car and driven away to be processed for arraignment on multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. The bail was set at $500,000. With their assets frozen and their reputation destroyed, they had no way to pay it. They were going to await trial in a cell, wearing orange jumpsuits that were decidedly not bespoke. In the days that followed, the silence in my life was replaced by the sound of paper shuffling, but this time, it was good paper. The letters arrived one by one. First came the letter from Lantern Bridge Finance. The language was cold, administrative, and devoid of apology, but it was the most beautiful thing I had ever read. "Dear Ms. Parker, regarding the dispute of account number 492, following the receipt of the police report and the affidavit of forgery, we have closed this account as fraudulent. The balance of $22,000 has been voided. We have instructed the credit bureaus to delete the trade line from your history. Then came Westline Bank, then the credit card companies. Each letter was a breath of air. My credit score, which had plummeted to the low 500s, began to tick upward. The red flags on my background check vanished. I was no longer a high-risk borrower. I was just Ava Parker again. A week after the arrest, I received a summons. Not to court, but to a small conference room in the glass tower of Ashford Logistics Group. I walked in, expecting a grand reunion. I expected Leonard to be sitting there with open arms, ready to weep over the years we had lost. I found him sitting at a glass table with a thin portfolio in front of him. He did not hug me. He stood up, shook my hand firmly, and gestured for me to sit. "You did good work, Ava," Leonard said. His voice was gravelly and direct. "You organized the evidence. You held your nerve. You stopped them." "We stopped them," I said. "The card started it." "The card was a tool," Leonard corrected. "You were the mechanic." He opened the portfolio. Inside was a single document bearing the seal of the Ashford Hardship Trust. "Now we talk about the future," Leonard said. "I am not going to give you $1 million. Ava, I am not going to write you a check so you can sit on a beach and do nothing. That is what destroyed your mother. Money without labor is poison." He slid the document toward me. "This is the activation charter for your trust fund," he explained. "It operates on a matching principle. For every dollar you earn through legitimate, documented work, whether it is photography, retouching, or scrubbing floors, the trust will match it, dollar for dollar. You earn 100, I give you 100. You earn 1,000, I give you 1,000. I looked at him, surprised. It wasn't a handout. It was leverage. "It is an accelerator," Leonard said, watching my face. "If you work hard, you will build wealth twice as fast as anyone else. If you do nothing, you get nothing. Your honesty, your receipts, and your effort are the collateral. Do you accept these terms? I thought about the noodles. I thought about the hustle. I thought about the years I spent building a career that my parents tried to steal. I accept, I said. Good, Leonard said. He didn't smile, but his eyes crinkled at the corners. Now tell me about this studio you wanted to rent. I didn't waste time. I took my portfolio, my real portfolio, the one with the photos, not the fraud evidence, and I walked into the corporate offices of Evergreen Market. I asked to speak to the marketing director. I told them I was the photographer who knew exactly what their customers looked like because I was one of them. I pitched a campaign focused on local, gritty, authentic food stories. They hired me. It was a small contract, just a few $1,000s to start, but it was real work. I sent the invoice to the trust. 24 hours later, I received a notification, match verified, funds deposited, with the combined cash. I put down the security deposit on a studio space in the Arts District. It was not the studio dream I had fantasized about 4 years ago. It was a converted warehouse space with exposed pipes and a drafty window, but it had great light, and more importantly, my name was the only one on the lease. On the morning I moved in, I did something out of habit. I woke up at 5:30, I put on my coat, and I walked to the bus stop. I boarded the number 41 bus at 6:03. The driver looked at me, surprised to see me without my frantic energy. The bus was quiet. I sat in the same seat. Halfway back on the right side, I pulled out a cup of instant noodles, but these weren't the 40-cent sodium bricks I used to eat. I had packed them myself. High-quality ramen noodles, fresh spinach, a soft-boiled egg, and homemade broth in a thermal cup. I ate them as the city rolled by outside the window. It wasn't a meal of desperation anymore. It was a ritual of remembrance. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the Evergreen Market card. I turned it over in my hand. The plastic was scratched and worn. I looked at the small silver code on the back. HFT 41 AVA. It had been a mystery. Then it had been a lifeline. Then it had been a trap. And now, finally, I understood what it really was. It was a key. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Ashford Trust notification, documentation received. Studio deposit match complete. I stared at the screen. For the first time in months, the number in my bank account didn't make me want to vomit. It made me feel steady. I opened the voice memo app on my phone. I had gotten used to recording things. I pressed the red button. If you are listening to this, I said, speaking to my future self, or maybe to anyone who felt the walls closing in, you probably know what it feels like to eat instant noodles for breakfast because you have no other choice. You know the panic of the overdraft fee. You know the shame. I paused, watching the sun come up over the Riverton skyline. But remember this, I continued. Noise dies, screaming dies, drama dies, but paper doesn't. Keep the receipts, write the ledger, and never let them write your story for you. I stopped the recording. The bus hissed to a halt at my stop. I stood up, throwing the empty noodle cup into the trash bin by the door. I stepped off onto the sidewalk. The morning air was crisp and smelled of rain. I walked past a newsstand. On the bottom rack, buried under the national headlines, was a local paper. The headline read, "Former ministry couple indicted in massive fraud case. Forensic audit reveals offshore accounts." There was a picture of Darren and Paula, looking haggard and angry as they were led into the courthouse. I didn't stop to buy it. I didn't even slow down. I had already read that story. I had written that story. I walked 2 blocks to the brick building on the corner. I unlocked the heavy metal door with my own key. I walked into the empty studio space. The sun was pouring in through the skylight, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I set down my bag. It was heavy with groceries, real vegetables, real meat, real coffee. I stood in the center of the room and listened. There were no emails from angry landlords. There were no texts from guilt-tripping mothers. There were no notifications of stolen money. There was just silence. I smiled. It wasn't the wide, fake smile my mother used for photos. It was a small, private thing. I wasn't rich. I still had to work. I still had to hustle. But I had the evidence. I had the card. And for the first time in 28 years, I had a life that actually belonged to me. Thank you so much for listening to Ava's story of justice and redemption. I would love to know where you are listening from today. So please drop your location in the comments below and share your thoughts on how Ava handled her family. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help us share these stories with more people.